air was thick with humidity, and the smell of wet earth clung to my skin as I pushed through the underbrush. The woods were dense here, older, darker than the ones near my house. The kind of place you hear about in local legends but never dare enter. But I was stupid. Or brave. I wasn't sure which. Either way, I found myself deep in the forest, the sunlight barely breaking through the canopy above. I wasn't planning on being out here long. It was supposed to be a quick walk, just to clear my head. But something had called me deeper, past the familiar trail, into the heart of the woods. At first, it was subtle. The way the wind rustled through the trees, almost like a whispering voice. I dismissed it, attributing it to the wind. But then it happened again, clearer this time. A voice. Low, drawn out, and just faint enough for me to wonder if I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, or maybe an animal. But the voice came again, just as faint but unmistakable. My pulse quickened. I stopped, straining to hear. Help. It was a whisper, but it sounded like it was coming from the very depths of the woods, just beyond the trees. I wasn't one to panic. I'd done my share of hiking in isolated places. But this felt wrong. The woods were too still now. The usual sounds, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves had all stopped. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Hello. I called out, my voice trembling slightly. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement. The woods were eerily silent, and for a moment, I wondered if I was just being paranoid. Maybe I'd had too little sleep lately. But then, the voice came again. Louder, more desperate. Help me. I turned sharply, my heart thumping in my chest. The voice had sounded closer this time, coming from the direction of a thick cluster of trees to my left. I couldn't explain why I felt compelled to go toward it. Something about the way the voice had pleaded. It felt like a promise of answers. A way out of the strange, gnawing emptiness that had been growing inside me for weeks. I followed the sound, my feet crunching against the dry leaves and twigs. The trees here were old, gnarled, their bark twisted like the faces of forgotten gods. The deeper I went, the darker it became, until the sunlight was almost entirely blocked out by the dense canopy above. As I pushed through a particularly thick patch of underbrush, I saw something. A figure. At first, it looked like a person, a woman, standing motionless in the clearing ahead. Her long, dark hair draped over her shoulders, and her clothes seemed old, like something out of a different time. My first thought was that maybe she was lost, or injured. But then I noticed the way she stood. Her body was stiff, unnaturally rigid, as if frozen in place. I took a tentative step forward. Are you okay? I called out, my voice wavering slightly. She didn't move, not even to acknowledge me. But then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A flicker of movement, something fast, darting between the trees behind her. It was a blur, a shadow that seemed to shift with the wind. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The woman's head slowly turned toward me, her eyes wide, unblinking. There was something wrong with her gaze. Empty, like the eyes of a corpse. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. A chill ran down my spine. Before I could react, I heard it again, closer this time. The voice. Help me. But this time, it wasn't coming from the woman. It was coming from somewhere behind her. Something was moving in the shadows. A sound, like heavy breathing, followed by a low, guttural growl. My heart slammed in my chest. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body felt frozen, like I was trapped in the woods by something far older than I could comprehend. The woman's mouth twisted into a smile. It wasn't a human smile, though. It was white and jagged, like something that belonged in a nightmare. I could feel the air around me growing colder, the smell of decay creeping into my nose. And then, her voice no longer a whisper, but a command. Don't run. I don't know how I stayed rooted to the spot, but I did. My breath came in shallow gasps as I fought the urge to flee. Something was wrong, horribly wrong. The longer I stood there, the more the woods seemed to close in on me, the shadows growing darker, thicker. A low, rasping laugh echoed through the trees, and from the corner of my eye, I saw it an unnatural shape, towering behind the woman. It was like a shadow made of smoke and darkness, its form barely discernible, but the eyes. I could see the eyes. They were gleaming, predatory, and they were watching me. The thing shifted, and the air around me became oppressive, suffocating. I felt a presence pressing in on me, squeezing the very air from my lungs. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. And then, the woman spoke again, her voice a haunting echo. Help me, before it's too late. Without thinking, my feet finally obeyed. I turned and bolted, crashing through the underbrush, branches slapping against my face as I ran. The sounds of pursued footsteps, dragging limbs, the whispering voice followed me, growing louder with each step. But when I dared to glance back, there was nothing. The clearing was empty. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, breathless and trembling, I was certain of one thing: I hadn't just encountered a lost soul. I had found something far worse, something ancient and hungry, lurking in the depths of the trees. And whatever it was, it hadn't let me go. Not yet.